So we're talking about 10 cognitive distortions. Before I get to that, I want to just make a quick announcement of like staff change, I guess. And so that's why I don't have the graphic, and we're doing some changes. So I actually ended up bringing someone on who's been on our community to help me, who's been in our community since like day one. Like my cheerleader wanted to do stuff for free, has been an assistant for a couple people before. They both begged her to come back, and she just such a hot commodity, she wouldn't. So I scooped her up and hired her, and you might know her. Her name's Brittany Sacco. If you want to say hi, quick, Brittany.
Hey guys.
So yeah, super happy to have her. Well, I'll make an announcement, but Brittany's partnering with me, which she helped me a lot anyways. I mean, literally for free for like, I don't know, over a year. And so she's got a lot of attention to detail. And then also she'll be helping with like client services in the Facebook groups, and then our ADHD agents coaching group, because I wanted community members to have someone that's really approachable, that's also very detail oriented besides me, for really quick response if you need something, billing, anything like that. So she is part of the team now, and she's working about 30 hours for me. So yeah, happy to have her. And so that's why we're switching up the graphics and doing some stuff. So anyways, very exciting. Very grateful to have her, and I'll put more out there. So we are doing the 10 cognitive distortions, and that's the call. And so what I want to start out with is like, what is a cognitive distortion? Because somebody asked that, and that's such a great question. So a cognitive distortion, think of this kind of like, in real estate, we hear about like negative thinking, right? We hear that like, I want to be positive, and I'm negative thinking and things like that. So, and I have a mental health background prior to being in real estate. And so what a lot of people don't understand is that negative thinking is just this huge umbrella term that really doesn't like encompass the nuances of what it really is to like think negative, right? It's like this bad thing, like, oh, why are you doing that? Why are you thinking negative? Like, think positive. It's like something wrong with you or something, right? And that's what I've observed a lot, kind of moving into the real estate field from the mental health, which it's so different in mental health. It's so different, and I think that, and it depends if it helps, if that thinking helps. From mental health, though, like identifying what we call cognitive distortions and naming them and using tools is so much more efficient than labeling it negative thinking and putting a band-aid on it, like, oh, why am I feeling angry? Let me do a gratitude list, or let me numb out. It's like something temporary instead of like really recognizing a thought pattern and like what to do about it. And so that's what I want to talk about, is like the 10 main cognitive distortions, which are really like negative thinking patterns in a sense. So a cognitive distortion, this is how they define it. It's a biased thoughts that are influenced by emotions and can be inconsistent with reality. It's also could be referenced as a false narrative. And I'll do a visual here in a little bit. So biased thoughts that are influenced by emotions and can be inconsistent with reality, and a false narrative. So that's really how you can define a cognitive distortion. And so, another thing that I want you to think about with like negative thinking or cognitive distortions is not because you're just a negative person when you have these come up. That's not what's happening. I didn't learn about that in mental health. We didn't. There is no, oh, this one's just negative. Like, that's not what we learn. It's usually a response that's trying to protect you or help you or avoid anxiety or something like that. It's not because you're negative. So that's why that you might have these, is because at some point it was a coping skill. It was something you learned, something like that, right? So I want to show you and tell you some of these, and you can tell me if they resonate. I'm going to do a screen share right now of what the main cognitive distortions are. And this is like what I'm sharing with you now. This is from working in mental health, and these are recognized. I mean, this is who did this? David Burns. So David Burns identified these and did the studies on this, and this is used all over. And so see if these resonate. And these are common with ADHD. We can go that way with autism. It could be a trauma response. It could be substance abuse, eating disorder, chronic illness. Also just average. Like, everyone has in and out of cognitive distortions, and really it's the severity and the frequency of it where it crosses a line where it might be a trauma response, right? Or something that really needs to be addressed. So cognitive distortions, the first one is all or nothing thinking. So you look at things in absolute, like black and white, and this is really common for ADHD and autism too, because we want to put things in categories, right? So if something happens, It's easy to say, oh, this was like let's say you didn't get a listing, right? You didn't get a listing signed. All or nothing thinking would be, man, I didn't get the listing signed. I probably did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, and I just really, really messed it up, right? So it's like the black, it's bad. Or, if you do get a listing, the other side, it might be, man, I'm better than everybody. I'm so good. I'm going to get every single thing signed. Like, no matter what, nobody can touch me. Which, I mean, it's, again, these aren't like terrible. It's not like you should avoid them at all times. Sometimes there's a benefit to all or nothing, because I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a goal, right? And you decide, I'm going all in, and every single thing I do is towards this goal. I'm all in. Great example today. I won't name names, but it's so good about saving money, right? So somebody's saving money in every area. They want to pay off debt, so they're maybe not buying as much groceries, and they're going super cheap on that, and they're and this is just random examples, right? Maybe they're watching the thermostat and they're trying to get everything for free, and they're like selling everything on marketplace, and it's to the extreme, right? It's all or nothing. It's, I'm either all in or not. Have you ever said that? Like, I'm either all in on my lead gen or I haven't done it at all. I'm either all in on my schedule, I'm not doing it at all. I'm going to do time blocking, man, I failed, now I'm not doing it at all. So it's how you're going to identify this is like, are there two options? I either do it or I don't do it. That could be a sign of all or nothing thinking, or black and white thinking. And the other thing to think about with this is like black and white thinking, the black hurts. It feels terrible because you're going to the extreme and you're only looking for the stuff that matches that thing. So for example, with that, let's say you're out in public, and let's say networking, right? Anybody have social anxiety here, or anxiety when you go networking? Okay. Does anybody not? Anybody love and doesn't have anxiety? Right? So we got a mix. I think it's more often you have anxiety. So you go to a network and you say a couple things and you feel kind of awkward. I've totally been there. So you go and you network and you feel awkward and you feel like, oh man, they didn't respond really well to that. And it's like, man, I'm so awkward. Like, why am I here? And I'm not going to get business this way. And how does everybody else know how to talk? And man, I've never had great social skills and I didn't have as many friends. Right? So you just look for evidence to support this narrative that's to the extreme. And then it hurts because it's not actually true. Maybe you did say some awkward stuff, but the person you were talking to was busy or stressed or was having a fight with their spouse and they had to go home, and then maybe the other person you ran into was really awkward too. So what can happen though is we look for data and we prove a story and everything's like bad, right? And I'm going to go through more because basically, Jen, I'm going to go through the checklist of the cognitive distortions, and then we're going to talk about the 10 ways to untwist your thinking, and then a little bit more detail on some of that stuff. So that's kind of, I'll give you more definition, but all or nothing thinking is one of the biggest ones. That's why I want to go. That's why I spent a little bit more time on it. And it's a defense mechanism because also the middle ground doesn't feel safe, right? It can feel more safe to say this is bad or good. This person's bad or safe, especially if you've had trauma growing up. You need to know that in a split second if it's safe, if the environment's safe. So if you have trauma, it's going to turn the volume up as well. So it's just, again, our brains can kind of categorize stuff. So that's all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, but it can be good too if you're going all in on a goal or you make a huge change really quickly because you go all in. So it's how you use it. Next one is overgeneralization. So you view a negative event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. Have you ever knocked out a listing and then thought, man, I'm just not good at listings, Or maybe maybe like you worked on some graphic and it's like, I just don't do this well. Or, or like lead generation. You call a seller, let's say, or for sale by owner, and it goes really bad. And you just think, well, every time I call for sub owners, it's going to go bad and have anxiety, so I'm never calling for sub owners again. So again, some of these may resonate, some of these may not, but think of certain things because what can happen in these situations, if you can pause and say, oh, wait, is this all or nothing thinking? Oh, so maybe this narrative isn't 100% true. It stops like the turmoil, right, in the cycling. So the next one is what's called a mental filter. So you dwell on the negatives and ignore the positives. And so I'm going to give you an example that I used to do. I would say I'm a recovering people pleaser for sure. And my first year in real estate, I think I closed like 36 houses. My second year was like 56 or something. And I worked my butt off, right? Like I cared so much. And I was so scared to call past clients because all I could think about were the couple things I didn't do right, and I was embarrassed to call them. Even though I got them a great price, sold. I mean, it wasn't salesy. I mean, they had an incredible experience. But all I could think about was how I didn't add $100 on something and I didn't call back soon, like these little stuff. So mental filter was on dwelling on the negatives, and then I didn't call, and they would have loved if I called. So that's a mental filter. Discounting the positives. So you insist that your accomplishments or positive qualities don't count. So as a coach, I've heard people who have done incredible things with their business, and they literally put it on luck. It's insane. Where it's like, I just got lucky this year. Oh my gosh, you got a whole, you got 50% over what you did, whereas other agents did like nothing this year. You did 50% more of your goal. Yeah, well, I got that, that land complex and I had some more listings. I got that deal. It's just lucky, right? Instead of like, you know what? Yeah, I stayed consistent and I had the conversations and I did do well. So it's like you basically see the negatives and you don't validate or celebrate the positives or the accomplishments, which I think that's just real estate too. Especially if you're really learning based and like growth oriented, you're always looking at the gap. A lot of times, you're looking at the gap instead of where you came from. And so it is really helpful to just pause and do that sometimes of where you came from. Jumping to conclusions. This is number 5. A mind reading. You assume that people are reacting negatively to you when there's no definite evidence for this, or fortune telling. You arbitrarily predict things that will turn out badly. So this is another one, especially with trauma. And again, like we all experience this, whether you have trauma or not, but a lot of us do have trauma. A lot of humans do. So with this, with the jumping to conclusions, you think it's going to turn out negative before it's even happened, right? If I call this person, it's not going to go well. So therefore, I'm not going to do it because it creates pain and anxiety. And that might even be subconscious. Like you don't even recognize you're doing it, or I'm not going to go door knock because it's this time of day. And what if I get this person, so you're like already assuming the negative. So here's the thing. It's trying to protect you because you have this negative story. So it's saying what could go wrong. Okay, let me avoid that so I don't feel pain. I don't feel anxiety. I don't feel rejection. I don't feel, like depression. So again, it's so important to recognize that these are trying to help you versus shaming yourself for being negative. And so instead you want to have compassion for yourself and like, yeah, just like understand, right? Don't judge as much as you can. So then we have magnification or minimization. You blow things way out of proportion or you shrink their importance inappropriately. So blowing something way out of proportion, I have, again, as a coach, like I see this, I've done this too. So blowing things way out of proportion might be something like not like getting a pending that week and then getting really, really, really anxious. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a pending. Now it's like, this is going to happen and I'm not going to have enough money. And I'm going to, oh my gosh, what if I have to get back to my old job? And what am I going to do? And again, if you don't have a pending weeks and weeks in a row, then you want to have that normal anxiety, but it's kind of taking something that happened and then magnifying it where it's a much bigger deal than it is instead of, hey, I'm feeling stressed because I didn't get my pending. What can I do about it? Because when you go down the rabbit hole and you're cycling in it, it gets bigger and bigger and you actually get dysregulated and anxious and you can't take action as easily because you can't do the thing because you're anxious and you've used all your fuel for regulating your emotion and not having a breakdown. This one is really interesting. Emotional reasoning. This is number 7. So you reason from how you feel. Man, I feel like an idiot, so I really must be one. Or I don't feel like doing this, so I'll put it off. And this is a little bit different example because we have executive function with ADHD. I rarely meet someone who I would say actually is a procrastinator. So that emotional reasoning. So I feel this way, so I must be. And I'm going to use social examples, and I'm going to call myself out because I'm on the autism spectrum, and I've really had to learn social cues. And man, it's been painful. There's like a certain set of rules that people have socially, and I have some of them, but I don't know what some of them are. And so it's really easy, especially for me, to go in a situation and like when I was a kid, I would say awkward jokes like that didn't really fit, and then I'd be like, man, like nobody likes me, or like man, I'm just like, I think I'm funny, but I'm really not. Like I must be kind of a loser, or like, what's wrong with me? Or, man, I feel dumb, so maybe I'm dumb. I must be dumb, And so instead of like interrogating reality and saying like, oh no, I'm really smart in this and smart in this and smart in this. Oh, I'm around these people and my humor doesn't fit. So it's again, it's almost like a lot of it's all or nothing, right? It's like more extreme. So I feel like an idiot, so I must be one. I feel like I'm bad at real estate, so I must be terrible. Should statements. Oh my gosh. This is number 8. You criticize yourself or other people with shoulds or shouldn'ts, musts, oughts, have tos, or similar offenders. So my mentor, her name's Diana Kokoska. She wrote Bold for Keller Williams, if you've heard of that. She was like 5 times Businesswoman of the Year for, I don't know, something huge. She's amazing, wonderful person. She's been on one of our calls. But she used to say, Tyler, stop shoulding all over yourself. Because I'd say, I should have done this. I should do this. She's like, Tyler, you're shitting everywhere. Stop shitting on yourself. And she's like, doesn't swear, this, like, she's tiny and just a powerhouse of business. And so I loved hearing her say that. So it's like, I should have done that. I should have done that. So I'll just tell you the cure for this is if you could swap the word should with could, it can remove a lot of shame from what you're saying. So I should have done lead gen. I could have done lead gen, right? Energetically, it feels a lot different because if you just bury yourself in shame, well, you're just going to be buried and like have no energy. I could have done lead generation. I could have gone to that class. I could have saved more money. It's a much more empowering thing versus just burying yourself and digging a hole. So if you can take the word should out of your vocabulary, unless you are apologizing legitimately to someone and you really messed up, then please swap that with the word could because it will change so much for you. Number 9, labeling. So you identify with your shortcomings. This is big. Instead of saying I made a mistake, you tell yourself I'm a jerk, a fool, or a loser. So here's something I've recognized too a lot in achievement culture and neurodivergence. A lot of us can attach our self-worth to our actions. It's almost conditional. We can love other people unconditionally and not judge them because there's high empathy in our group. But when it comes to us, if we don't hit numbers, we're not good enough. If we don't do this, we're not good enough. And this just takes it to, this is just taking it to another level, right? It's like, if I didn't hit sales, I'm actually not as competent as I thought. If I didn't hit my goal, I'm not as smart as I thought. So instead of saying, oh, I'm good how I am, I'm smart, and my numbers were this, and I want them to be this, we turn it on ourselves and then make a statement about ourselves. And so I would say if you can be as careful as possible with that, because I say it all the time, coaching in real estate agents, is this identifying our worth with our numbers, with our actions, with our productivity. Because the other thing, is there anyone who has trouble taking vacations or resting or letting yourself rest? Okay, and if you don't, awesome. If you do, could be, not all, but some people who have issues with that, underlying it's because they tie their worth to productivity. So if you're not productive, you're not good enough. I see somebody's getting called out. I can see some faces, right? So if you rest, you're not producing, which means you're not good enough. So resting means I'm not good enough, therefore I can't rest, right? And then you don't rest, and then you're tired, and you're always operating at like 50 to 75% because you're exhausted and you won't let yourself rest. But again, the pain of not feeling good enough is so big that we'd rather keep going because we can't handle it. And that makes sense. Like, not feeling good enough feels like life or death. It feels terrible. It feels horrible to not feel good enough. It's like the worst feeling. That's why I worked like so many hours and built a team in the top 100 in KW. We were doing, co-built it, and we were doing like over 300 sales. So we'd have one sale Monday through Friday every day, at least one, sometimes two for the entire year, right? And I'm going to tell you, still didn't feel good enough. And that was a big moment for me because pushing. I mean, dedicated my whole life, right? I don't even remember much of my 20s to be able to do this. I started in real estate, I guess, when I was 23, 24. I'm 37 now. So from 23, 24 until 30, 31, I literally don't remember much because I was just working because I didn't feel good enough because of all the different stuff that was different about me. I felt like there's this huge gap. And then if I could just do this, if I could get this body fat percentage, if I could just get this many sales, if I could get this much money, if I could do this, like, then I'll be good enough. And then you get to that spot and you don't feel good enough. And then you raise the bar again, you raise the bar and you raise the bar. And then you get to like, okay, top 100 in the world, like, oh, like, okay, if I don't feel it now, I probably won't. And that was a big moment for me when that happened. It was the best and worst thing that ever happened because I realized I looked back and I thought, how many years did I waste chasing this and it's never going to satisfy it, you know? And what's interesting is you are going to see that in some big names. I'm telling you, you're going to see that in big names. And some of those people that you think are very confident on big stages, they literally don't feel good enough. And I'm not going to call someone particular out, and I'm not whatever. I just want you to know that this affects everyone. And some people are successful because they have to be, because it's literally tied to their self-worth. So when you see somebody on the stage that's doing huge things, you don't know the sacrifice and you don't know the gap in them that made them get there. There are people who do feel good enough, because here's the thing, when you shift and you can fill that gap yourself, your motivation changes. So instead of chasing this thing to feel good enough that you never get to there, you start saying, I'm good how I am, and now I'm doing these actions because I want to, because they're tied to a bigger purpose, because it feels fun. So you switch from having I say you have a codependent relationship with your business because you need it to feel okay, you need your productivity, you're codependent on it for your worth, and then you shift to an interdependent relationship with your business. You do it because you want to. You do it because it's fun. And you're shifting from going away from what you don't want, right? Which is like, I don't want to feel not good enough. So my motivation is to go away from that to going towards what you do want, which is like, I want to have fun and be creative with my marketing and help people and build community. And so one is much more energizing than the other, and you can actually do way more production. So when you shift out of that, I'm not good enough, I have to produce, you shift into the I'm going towards what I want, and you actually do more production when you let go of needing it to feel enough. And I see that all the time. But there are some people with millions of dollars that are at the top in real estate, and they may never get to that point. It's like a hungry ghost. That's how I felt. I was a hungry ghost chasing enoughness with numbers. So I'm getting deep on you today. I'm getting real. But that's cognitive distortions, right? So that's labeling, right? Number 10, personalization or blame. So you blame yourself for something you weren't entirely responsible for, or you blame other people and overlook ways that your own attitudes and behavior might contribute to a problem. So there's two things with this. One, you blame yourself for something you weren't entirely responsible for, or you blame others. You don't take responsibility. Of this population, neurodivergent, which one do you think we do more? We blame ourselves for something we weren't responsible for, or we blame other people and don't take responsibility? We know it's the first one, right? I mean, people are shaking heads. Most of us, if not all, if we're going to do one of these, we're probably going to take overly responsible. I love seeing the smiles, like it resonates. You know, we're going to be overly responsible, and we might even get in situations that aren't great for us with people that maybe aren't safe people or great people or just don't take responsibility, and we take 110%. Which a lot of stuff there's a silver lining, because if you're in that crew that doesn't take responsibility, that does take responsibility for everything, I think it contributed to my success, because there's no victim there. There's no victim in Tyler Land. I mean, to my knowledge, that I'm aware of. And so I would take responsibility for everything. Like, if there wasn't a script that was helpful, I'm going to go Google one and find one. I'm not going to blame the company or the script library if they don't work. You know, if I didn't get a listing appointment, I'm not going to say some story about the seller or the agent. I'm going to say, what did I not do? Even if I was perfect, what can I do differently? What can I do better? You know, if I have 3 people that quit on my team at one time, and you're going to see this in some of the top people of teams, the ones that do well, typically, I mean, you'll find a mix of both, are the ones that say, hey, those 3 people quit. What did we do? Instead of, man, they were crazy, and they all went together and took our leads. Like, oh, man, those are terrible people. How do we hire them? Like, let's never talk to them again. Let's block them. I mean, that's more average, I think. And so that's why we do have like an advantage by being overly responsible for things and by taking responsibility. However, again, there's like a silver lining to it, right? Sometimes we don't get angry when we should get angry because someone like went over our boundaries and we didn't recognize it because we thought it was our fault, or we people please, you know, or we don't acknowledge, or we might be around people that aren't great for us, which I absolutely have done. So that's the thing to really look out for is, and you'll see like a lot of these are extremes, right? Kind of with the black and white, the all or nothing. A lot of these are kind of going to extreme. And one thing to remember too is that extremes hurt. So if you're having a lot of thoughts that hurt a lot, there's a good chance it might be like a distortion depending on the hurt. Now, if like let's say someone passes away and it hurts a lot, it's going to hurt in a different way. You're going to grieve. It's going to feel cathartic. It's going to feel authentic. It's not going to poke and twist in the same way. I don't know if I'm articulating this. Like, it's going to feel different when something hurts because it hurts versus a thought hurts. It's not true. There's a different type of pain that's like a little bit distorted with it. I've had all of these. I have a lot of, you guys know I got a whole wheelbarrow of trauma and diagnoses. So I've been in like, sometimes I went to therapy like 2 times a week. I was in this stuff extreme. I mean, there was a time where I started recognizing my all or nothing thinking, and I felt like it was my only way of thinking. Literally, it was like black and white. And I remember crying to my therapist, like, can I fix this? Like, this is horrible. And she was like, yes, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And like 2 years later, I'm in a really, I was in a really solid spot. So if you experience this, like once you recognize these and you start to recognize them, like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this all the time. That's good. That's the first step, is to acknowledge that. And then I forgot about the all or nothing thinking, and just a lot of these, a couple words to look out for. If you notice yourself saying like always, never, every time, those are good indicators you might be an all or nothing thinking. Man, every time I go on listening appointment, this one happens. Man, I'm always gonna be like bad with buyers, man, I never hit my annual goal. That's a good indication that you're in this kind of extreme thinking, is those word choices can be. So, and then I am going to, I can't look at the comments right now, but I am going to send this out. So this whole PDF, you're going to get this. We're going to post in the Facebook group. We have Brittany now, who's doing the newsletter every Monday. So that is going to be consistent now, because I got overwhelmed and dropped it for a little bit, except in the Facebook group on the YouTube channel. So yes, you're going to get this. It's going to be emailed out as well. So 10 ways to untwist your thinking. And we'll have some questions too once I get through this. 10 ways to untwist your thinking. So the first thing, like I said, is to identify it. So this is really cool. Like when I'm in like the black, which still happens sometimes. And that's the other thing. Don't freak out if you're in it, especially if you've got like complex PTSD like I do. And this just feels so special to share. Like, I don't know, just like thanks for like allowing a platform where I can be honest about this stuff, because it was stuff that I hid because I wanted to be successful. And I love that it's cool to be human. And anyways, feel emotional getting to talk about this stuff. So with complex PTSD, what can happen sometimes is you get into all or nothing thinking because it's a trauma response, and you can't access anything else. Like I've gotten in that where you only see the black and you literally can't even remember stuff that's good or positive or happy. And you'll see this in depression too, which I've had that diagnosis as well. You really get in this all or nothing, like everything's bad. It's never going to get better. There's no hope. I'll be better. It's, people don't like me. I should just isolate. Right? It's just all this all or nothing. So it's hard to gauge. And so in the past, when I really had trouble with that, I would have sheets out. Like I would have stuff like this, or in my phone go-tos, because I literally couldn't access it in my brain. It was like I was like in a compartment. So I even had one time I had flashcards when my depression was really bad of the things that were good in my life that I was proud of. Ooh, get emotional. And just sensations that made me really happy, like things that I enjoyed about life. And I would pull out the flashcards and I would just go through when I was really stuck because I couldn't access them, and then it would kind of pull me out. So you might try different tools depending on the severity and how that shows up. So identifying it is like the most powerful thing, because when you recognize like, oh, I'm in a distortion, it immediately can take the emotional charge out of it. So you might want to write them down, right? If you're having like a loop over and over again, write it down. Sometimes just seeing on paper is like, oh, this is not true at all. That's okay. That's silly. So the next one is examine the evidence. So again, instead of assuming it's true, and we call it in coaching like 100% true model, is this 100% true? Like if you feel like you've never done anything right, can you list a couple things you could do successfully, right? It's like, man, I'm never good at listing appointments. I never do this well, or man, I'm not good with recruiting or whatever that is. It's like, well, hold on. Have you had a good experience before? Well, that's true. I did get 2 listings signed last year. Okay. So it's not that you're not good at listings at all, or it's not, so we want to like bring in a full picture versus just the mental filter towards the bad stuff. So making a list and then kind of challenging it. The double standard method. So this is, I actually have a really good friend who does this with me, is so instead of putting yourself down in a harsh way, think of like, what if it was your friend in that situation? Like, how would you talk to them? Or what advice would you give them? So let's say, for example, you didn't do lead gen for 2 weeks in a row and you feel terrible. I mean, you didn't do your business, and you're beating yourself up. If that was your friend, would you do the exact same thing? And if not, like, why not? Like, what would it do to them if you talked to them that way, right? You wouldn't be probably a very good friend. You'd be a lot more encouraging, I bet. And so we can talk to ourselves in this really like painful, kind of harsh way. But if we did it to somebody else, we know that it wouldn't work, you know? Because here's the thing: if shame worked, it would have already worked by now. If being hard on yourself worked, you would already be where you want to be. So it's not working, right? So if you beat yourself up all the time, like maybe you create enough pain to create cortisol, which creates a little bit of dopamine, so you can do a little thing and then you think it works. But if you stop creating pain and stress and cortisol through your thoughts, and it's easier said than done, right? Don't beat yourself up if you're doing it. And you were to encourage yourself, like let's say your friend who didn't lead gen for 2 weeks, and you said, hey, that's okay. You're going through a lot. There's a lot of stress. What can you do today? Let's do something small. I believe in you. You got this. Like, let's start now, right? That's how you move through. It's not the shame, I'm telling you. As someone who's coached some of the top agents in the world, it's generally not shame. Now, there are some weird like people masochists that need pain. They have everything they want. This is a very rare category. This is people like in the top 1% that have everything they'd ever want, and they like literally don't have motivation, and there's not a nonprofit or charity they're motivated by, and they will pay a coach to like yell at them. That is like less than 1%. I'm not in that 1%. I'm never going to be, and I bet you aren't either. So those are the only people that shame works, because nothing else will get them to move, because they literally have everything. Like they don't need anything. And they maybe aren't as into nonprofits or giving back, which I don't know anyone on this call that isn't about giving back. So that's the only time I've witnessed shame being like a good thing. So chances are it doesn't work for you. The experimental technique. So do an experiment to test the validity of your negative thought. So this is, so I also have OCD too. We're just doing a little collection here. And it can have a medical theme, which again, I'm telling you, like the leaps and bounds I've done is incredible. So here's the experimental technique, because I've done this before. So you do an experiment to test the validity of your negative thought. So the one they list here is if you have a panic attack and you become like terrified, you're going to die of a heart attack, which I've had that, right? It's like heart palpitations and it gets worse. So you could jog or run up and down several flights of stairs, and it's going to prove that your heart is okay. So if you think you're having a panic attack, or you think you're having a heart attack, so that was something I had to learn, that if I thought I was having a heart attack, I had to treat it like a panic attack. I would have what they called psychosomatic seizures almost. So basically, I would have a panic attack that would show up like a seizure, where I couldn't have cognitive language. It's been a fun ride, but I want you to know, like, my life is really effing good. And there's so much hope. I feel like I've done a lot of work, but it gets so much better, and I don't suffer. Like, I have a really good, peaceful life, and I want to put that out there, that it doesn't matter like how bad it is. It can get so much better. And that's why I just struggle with negative thinking, it should be better. Like, you shouldn't think like it. It's like, oh my God, no, give tools. Like, there's so much more to this, you know? So it's like you're testing it out. And I've done that before, where I've had shortness of breath, and then I went for a walk and it went away, and I was like, oh, it's anxiety. You know, it's not a heart attack. It's not like blood clot on my lung, that kind of stuff. So you kind of test the validity of it. Thinking in shades and gray, this is number 5. So they said, although this method might sound drab, the effects are illuminating. So instead of thinking of your problems in extremes, like, you're going to evaluate on a scale of 0 to 100. So this is really helpful too. So if you think, like, man, I'm terrible with money, you know, I'm just so bad with money. And you think, okay, on a scale of 0 to 100, how bad am I with money? You know, where am I at? 0 being horrible, and I literally just, every time I get $1, I burn it with a lighter. And 100 being like, I've saved every dollar. Where am I at? Well, I'm at I guess I'm at like maybe a 50. Okay, so you're not terrible and horrible, you know. There's some stuff you've done right. What have you done right? You know, So same thing. I hear this all the time. I don't have any systems. Anybody thought that? Man, I don't have any systems in my business. Yes, you do. You would not be where you are if you didn't have some systems. They might be in your head, but you do have systems. So that feeling of like, man, I have no systems. I've been in the business for 5 years. What's wrong with me? That's an all or nothing thought, and it hurts, and it doesn't feel good. Whereas like, hey, I've got 3 systems, and one of them might be just what I say or what I do, and let me look at those, and those work for me. So how do I replicate those? Do you see how like by staying curious and non-judgmental and non-shaming, you move forward so much faster? It's like this. It's just insane how much faster you can work by looking for the positives. Okay, the survey method, this is really great. You can basically like ask other people that you trust. I like to ask people on the autism spectrum because they tend to be more direct. Seriously. And I have friends that have autism too, and they'll just, I love that with people because we just go and there's not like pillows around it. It's just very direct. And I mean, people with ADHD can be direct as well, and a lot of us have both. But ask somebody that you trust will tell you the truth. They're not going to like give you fluff, like somebody who you say, hey, I want to know 100%, like, where would you score this? How was my talk at the market center? You know, or how do I come across it in networking? Because chances are your filter, like we talked about the mental filter, is probably darker than it really is if you're like me. So, and I explained it to someone else earlier today. It's kind of like a lot of us can have shade, like sunglasses on. So our behavior, how we come across, and this is neurodivergent too, we have trouble accurately gauging how we actually come across to people. And it's usually sent to the negative, especially if you've had trouble in school or social skills, or as I've talked about before, they showed us kids with ADHD have 20,000 more negative messages about their behavior by the age of 8, right? 20,000 more times we get corrected. So asking other people is really helpful. Define the terms. When you label yourself inferior, fool, loser, like ask yourself, what is the definition? So that's really helpful. Like, man, like I'm just so bad at this, you know, like I just shouldn't be, I'm just a loser. Like, what does a loser mean? Oh, well, I guess the loser would be somebody that quit. Have you quit? No. Okay. So you're probably not a loser, you know. Have you won at some things? You know. Number 8, the semantic method. And we'll go to questions in probably at 4:45 Eastern, so 5, 6, 7 minutes. Semantic method, and you'll get this whole thing. Simply substitute the language that's less colorful and emotionally loaded, right? And so it's helpful for like should statements. And this is kind of like the could. So instead of like, man, I shouldn't have made that mistake. It's like, it would have been better if I hadn't made that mistake. So it's softening. I could have made a different choice. I could have done something different. So you're just getting a little less emotionally charged, is what the semantic method is. Or, man, I can't believe I like overspent on all that stuff again. I'm terrible with money. Oh, you know what? I could have been more intentional with how I spent the money and check my account first. So think of next time, right? If you keep saying that, let's say you overspend, which we can do. We can be more impulsive, right? Can be. Some of us go the opposite, right? We're really good at saving money. But let's say you overspend and you beat yourself up. Man, God, I'm so bad with money. What's wrong with me? Like, I'm so impulsive. Why do I keep doing this? And that's the story versus, you know what? Next time I could have been a lot more intentional and I could have checked my bank account. And you keep saying that, even if you misstep a couple times, then what's going to happen, right, is eventually you're going to say, oh, I'm about to spend money. That's right. I need to check my bank account and be more intentional. So these are like when we talk about affirmations, these are the affirmations I like, right? You're really, and I like a lot of affirmations, but these are the ones that are really like, oh, you know what? That's right. I'm the type of person that wants to be intentional, and I'm going to check my bank account. So really, an affirmation or anything is just a narrative or something you tell yourself that then you kind of, it's like a story you tell yourself, right? It's a cognitive not distortion. I don't know what the opposite is, but it's it's cognitive, but not a distortion. And then reattribution. So instead of automatically assuming you're bad, blaming yourself, think about all the factors. Focus on solving the problem instead of like blaming yourself, because we have like willpower, right, or dopamine or fuel, and you have to use that to regulate your emotions. So if you are telling yourself you're bad all day, you're going to be trying to regulate that and not go down too far, right, and not go down in the dumps. You're going to be like navigating that and kind of trying to maintain your energy, all that takes fuel, and it can take that fuel away from lead generation, from time blocking, from creating. So we have, and they talk about this in the One Thing book. If you've read that by Jay Popzon and Gary Keller, the One Thing book, that we all have a fuel tank at the beginning of the day, and we have that fuel and we can use it on anything throughout the day. And there's stuff that takes more fuel, right? Regulating emotions, starting new habits, suppressing anger, not getting enough sleep, that kind of stuff. So if you're constantly shaming and blaming yourself, and then you can't do the thing because you don't have fuel, it could be literally because you're talking bad to yourself and trying to pain yourself into doing activities. Whereas if you stop that and stop shaming yourself for not doing it, you might actually be able to do it, if that makes sense, because you're not using the fuel to regulate your emotions and do that. And then number 10 is a cost benefit analysis. So this is, I mean, all this is really interrogating reality. And I do this like on coaching. I like these coaching calls because I mean, I don't like that people experience this, but it's something that I enjoy talking about because it can make a big difference right away. And it's really helpful. So listing the advantages and disadvantages of a feeling. So they say, like, no matter how hard I try, I always screw up, right? So if you were to list the advantages of having that thought, what would they be? Probably none, right? There's really no advantage to having that thought, maybe. You know, unless you're really motivated by pain, but again, it's pretty defeating. And then the disadvantage obviously is going to take your energy. So it might be like, oh man, that's not really helpful. You know, there's not really a benefit to that. Another one that's really interesting, and I'm just adding this in, is like, who would I be without this thought? So that's a really interesting one to think about. Like, let's say, speaking in front of a crowd. Let's say you're going to do a training in markets. So it's like, man, like I'm not very experienced. Like I'm not very good at this. I get nervous in front of people. They're probably going to judge me. It's like, okay, so who would you be if we just removed that thought? Well, I'd probably be more confident. I'd probably help them more because I'd be focused on them and not myself. So you can also kind of cost benefit whether a thought serves you. And here's what I'll say too: as you're doing all that, this is a lot of work. Like this is cognitive. Like you could get tired. This can be subconscious. Once you recognize it and it's conscious and you get in a habit, it will start to become more subconscious. Like your brain will adapt. So like, for example, like the black and white thinking. So for me, if I get my PTSD would get triggered before I did all this work, I might be triggered and in a state for like a month. Like seriously, I would get triggered and I'm in it for a month and I don't even recognize it. And then I use my tools and I pull it back and all that stuff. And then I got it to where I was only triggered for 2 weeks. And then I was triggered, and triggered, I mean like dissociated, right? Like frozen from my emotions, like maybe trouble sleeping, like all this stuff. And then I pulled it back from a week and I got it to like 2 days. And then one day I could turn it around. And then I could turn it around in half a day. And then it was an hour. And then it was 15 minutes. And then it was 5 minutes. And then it was a minute. And then I keep wanting to say the F word. Then it did it itself. So I'm not saying I cured PTSD, obviously. What I am saying, though, is that you can, some of it, depending on how it shows up. And there were a lot of triggers that I was able to integrate because the brain doesn't know, like, oh, you did it 10 minutes, now 5, now a minute, now 30 seconds, now 20. I mean, a thought takes like that. So you can kind of train your brain. So I really don't have much negative self-talk. I really don't. I mean, I'm sure there's some in there, but it's like literally like 5% of what it was. Yeah. So I just, again, if I can give anything, it's like, if I can do it, you can, you know, those are heavy. So anyways, these are a little bit more, you'll get this handout. So I want to go to some questions and I know there's tons of comments, but these are more like detail on this. If you want to see a little bit more about that. So yeah, you'll get this handout and then it's got some of the things we talked about there. So, and then too, like thoughts and feelings. This is really neat too. And what I'll say lastly with feelings for us with neurodivergence, there's a term, I want to make sure it's right. I think it's called alexithymia. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah. So this is really common, especially if you're on the spectrum, for having more difficulty identifying or understanding emotions. And sometimes they can be on a delay, or with neurodivergence, we can either feel like really big feelings or not. Versus like, oh, I'm a little happy, I'm a little sad. It's like, oh my God, I'm so depressed. Or like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I almost go manic. Or we just don't even know what we feel, So people might see us as cold or unemotional, but it's actually just a little bit harder for us to identify it. And so I want to throw that out there too if you experience that. So that's called alexithymia. So it's not that you're cold; it's just you feel really big emotions, or maybe not. But this is neat, kind of just some more things about emotion and what might be happening, and so we can talk emotions on another one. But I'm gonna